big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
The Bears are reporting to Indianapolis like the 31 other franchises for the NFL Scouting Combine. It is going to be a week filled with storylines. As you know, the Combine's the place where a lot of free agent deals tend to take place because there's a whole bunch of talk. Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. I'm Usayd Koshul. He's Nick Whalen. Check us out on Twitter at Halas Beat, at Usayd Koshul, at _Nick Whalen. Our publisher, Zack Pearson, is in the house today to talk some Combine stuff with us, some big storylines, prospects to watch. Zach, welcome to the show. How is it going? Thanks for hopping on today.
Yeah, for sure. As we're talking, anytime you guys want, you guys are doing a good job with this. So, yeah, I mean, this is great. I'm glad to join you guys. And now, we've had a couple weeks where it's been kind of dead space in a way, but the Combine ramps up, free agency in under a month. And before we know it, man, it's going to be April, and it's going to be those 3 days, and the Bears will be making some selections. So I'm excited to talk tonight.
The biggest storyline, Zach, is probably you feel better heading into the Combine because you're going to be there. So yeah. I mean, for you to perform, you know what I mean, and get stretching and get those jumps and those lifts, and you have to be healthy. So now you're good.
Yeah. So if I were out there running those things, guys would probably see me on like NFL Network as like the doofus running the the 3-cone shuttle or something like that. Or who's the guy? You guys remember the guy that got hit in the face with the football a couple years ago?
I don't.
Oh, so he was running. He was a tight end, and he was running the drill where he's going across the field.
The gauntlet. Oh yeah, he looked the wrong way, right?
Yes, he looked the wrong way and just got smoked. That would be me looking the right way. Like I'd be looking the right way and just getting smoked with the football. I love football, never played, hand up, never played, and I love it. But yeah, I have no football athleticism in my body. I was more of a basketball, soccer, baseball type guy. But yeah, like I said, I love football, and I love the Combine. The Combine's great. Like the Combine is awesome. I know, you guys are big into the draft. You guys are big into the Bears. It's like the draft is like Christmas. I'd say like the Combine's kind of like Thanksgiving in a way, where it's like you get like the big feast, and then now it's like, okay, here comes the Christmas. We're getting Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. So yeah, I think the Combine is a fantastic event, and I'm glad it's in Indianapolis too. It's a great city for it.
I know. I think they've got St. Elmo's, which is the bar that's over there that everyone loves to go to. But, hey, you never played football, but don't worry. Us coaches on this thing will help you break down everything to the point
I default to you guys.
Yeah, you are going to know the difference between inside zone and duo because when the Bears run this stuff, because it is not mutually the same thing. We'll talk gap scheme as well. But, okay, guys, let's get right into this thing because this is, to me, year 4 of the Ryan Poles era, year 1 of the Ben Johnson era, year 2 of the Caleb Williams era. I mean, is this like a make or break Combine for the Bears here? Because to me, number 10 is a complete wild card. And Zach, I'll go to you first. They could go with edge rusher. I know you mentioned Ashton Jeanty and Will Campbell as potential picks, but the Combine, I think, is going to change a lot of people's perceptions about what the Bears are doing when it comes to that number 10 overall pick. Because I would say Armand Membu, Josh Connolly Jr., some of these edge rushers like a Shamar Turner from Texas A&M are going to suddenly vault into the conversation.
Yeah, so when I look at it, it's obviously the Combine's always important. You're going to hear the stories of this player met with this team. Every player is going to meet with, a lot of teams. The physical things on the field are important. The interviews, I think, with the media and the teams are important. It's kind of been a little watered down a little bit in terms of like media interview players. But when you look at it for the Bears, they're sitting at number 10. I think you guys would agree, going into this offseason, they have major needs on the offensive line and the defensive line. When you talk about Ashton Jeanty and someone like Tyler Warren, to me, those are like luxury picks at 10 for a team that, can I don't think they can afford to spend valuable draft capital on a running back or a tight end that high. Maybe a trade back, I'd be a little more in agreement. But when I look at it, I put out an article of the best, players to watch at number 10, and Will Campbell's up there. If Mason Graham fell, He'd be someone. Kelvin Banks Jr., Josh Simmons from Ohio State's kind of getting a little hype. Michael Williams. I mean, if we did the show last year, James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, a lot of people had him number 1 overall. A young prospect, a guy who, could dominate in the pass rush, but, he's going anywhere now from top 5 to top 10. So here's the thing with the combine, though. You'll see some of these names just shoot right up the board from the combine performances. So I mentioned some of these guys, some could fall, some could rise. In the Bears case, if Mason Graham fell, I think that'd be ideal. I don't see it happening, but I think for the Bears, you got to almost go trenches at number 10 overall, unless it's a trade back.
So, one thing that I think is interesting at the combine that you'll see, because you'll be there and we'll hear more, is that's when the rumors start coming out. And I've heard some rumors of something about this guy, something about that guy, how they interviewed. Look, all that stuff's going to come out because it's going to be so hyper-focused. That's something that will come about. But one storyline among the Bears that we haven't mentioned yet that I think could affect a lot of things is, what if Ian Cunningham does get the job with the Jaguars? And now this is Ryan Poles' first draft without Ian Cunningham, who last year we saw through Hard Knocks, he was holding him back from trading up from Doomsday. And, I don't know how much, Ian contributed or Poles leaned on him versus himself. Like, we will see this year. So that could be something that could change what area they go to, what type of players they go after. But, you were kind of mentioning, you say the year 4 of Ryan Poles. Well, this could be year 1 without Ian Cunningham as well.
Yeah, and see, so Ian Cunningham's role with the Bears is so interesting because when the Bears had their pre-draft conference, I think it was back in 23, they didn't trot Ryan Poles or Matt Eberflus out there. Like, it was Ian Cunningham doing all the talking, and then I remember at that pre-draft presser last year, just 1 to 2 days before the Bears kind of took Caleb Williams, it was a lot of Ian Cunningham discussing the fact that, hey, I know I came from an organization in Philly where we drafted and developed a quarterback that went on to now win a Super Bowl. But the reality is we have to make this process our own, simply because we're not just going to copy paste things over. But see, I look at Ian Cunningham's role in all this thing, and let's be honest. I mean, if he does end up getting the Jags gig, it's going to have to happen at some point over the next couple of days, because there's no way they're going into next week without a general manager in place, right? Because that would just be mass dysfunction that I think is resetting the bar for what dysfunction's all about. But I look at the Bears here and I kind of say, all right, well, let's just say you trade back like Zach mentioned. Let's just say you get a lot of reports about the Bears meeting some of these guys from Ohio State, like a Josh Simmons or a Jack Sawyer, a JT Tolomolu, Donovan Jackson. I would even throw Gray Zabel's name in the ring as well if the Bears trade back. Those, I think, to me, are the prime Ryan Poles prospects in round 1, in the sense that they're not going to garner all the hype and attention, but they're going to schematically fit what Dennis Allen and Ben Johnson ultimately want to do. And it's going to create a situation, Zach and Nick, where I think everyone all of a sudden is going to do a full 180 in terms of the Bears draft plans.
Yeah, and I think, like Nick said, with Ian Cunningham, we saw like he had to hold Ryan Poles back from trading up to get Rome Odunze, which would have cost you even more draft capital, and probably, knowing what we know now, would have been a mistake. But yeah, we also have to factor this in. This is Ben Johnson. This is a new head coach. This is his new staff. This is Dennis Allen, Declan Doyle, Eric Bieniemy, Al Harris, Antoine Randall, a bunch of guys. The Bears retained a couple guys, Richard Hightower, Jim Dre. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of all mix and their scouting on these players. The GM scouts, the assistant GM scouts, head coach scouts. A lot of these assistant coaches are in these meetings as well, and they're scouting as well. They have input. The scouts are there, and they have input. So I'm kind of curious to see, how does this thing kind of mesh, and how are they going to work together to identify, that's the prospect we need. If there's a debate at number 10, let's say it's Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks, who gets the final say? How much input's this? How much input's that? Those are kind of things that we'll start to learn about a little bit now, and we'll probably fully learn it as the rest of the offseason goes on. But, it's not only Ryan Poles, it's Ben Johnson now, first-time head coach at the Combine. So how does he talk to prospects. What is he looking for in a prospect? So you remember, you look at Detroit, and nothing to discredit Ben Johnson. They built it different than the Bears. They had Penei Sewell. Was it an Iowa linebacker they took? That was probably a round 2 high.
Jack Campbell.
Yes, and a lot of people criticize him for that. People were, what are you doing drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, that high? And so we'll have to see how Ben Johnson wants to build his team and what his relationship with Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham, if Ian Cunningham is here, which, like you said, we should know if they don't hire someone by, Saturday or Sunday, there's a serious issue going down in Jacksonville.
Right. Which isn't uncommon for Jacksonville.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to mention, I guess, to everyone that's watching, listening, if you're here, listening or watching to Bears content right now, you're probably going to be tuning in for the combine and you're going to see some things going on. So I have a few things that I watch for, and I'm curious what you guys have in terms of the combine, because there's a lot. Some people would say some things are boring and some things they get overly excited about. Like, I think 40 times gets very overrated. But here are some things that I like. I'll mention a couple, and then we can maybe go a little round robin here. So one is for offensive tackles, it's arm length. I'm an arm length guy. I know some of the people don't think it matters a whole lot. I think the NFL cares. And so if you're wondering kind of why that is, there's this battle that goes on the edge, okay? And defensive ends try to long arm. Where that is, they try to put one arm in the chest of the offensive tackle, and that's to get the first point of contact and to kind of help out. And they don't go two hands, because they go two, then the arms are shorter. So they try to go one arm, okay? So in terms of D-end arm length, I'm looking for 33 inches or more, okay? That would be ideal. Doesn't have to be, but that would be ideal. But then offensive tackles, I'm looking for 33 and a half. 34 would be great. But if you're less than 33, you're likely moving into guard. So we're going to have to watch and see what happens to Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, et cetera. We're trying to figure out what kind of arm length they have. So those measurements, I think, are really going to be telling for where they're going to fall and what position they're going to be in the draft.
Yeah, and I remember Peter Skoronski a couple of years ago played here in Chicago, right? High school area kid, Chicago area kid, right? Went to Northwestern. Like, he was a tackle at Northwestern. And again, this kid, I think if you're an offensive tackle in the Big Ten, you must be a pretty damn good player. But then he moved inside to guard. Now, what's so telling to me about this entire situation here, as we look at the Bears, right? So you've got your Kelvin Banks, you've got your Will Campbell, okay? Just comparing the two guys, they've kind of been 1A, 1B the entire summer, the entire season. Like I said in previous shows, this to me kind of comes down to scheme fit. But the other key telling thing is this. So they're both right now listed at 320 pounds. Banks is 6'4", while Will Campbell's 6'6". Are the Bears potentially going to want someone that is bigger in terms of their height, but also more athletic, someone that can kind of get out there on the edge? Because there isn't in this class amongst the offensive linemen, there's not that freakish athlete in Penei Sewell that Ben Johnson can build his offense around, but in a sense, like, Will Campbell comes in to be the next best thing. But then also, like, Ryan Poles loves to value offensive linemen and specifically tackles that are taller. Like, Karan is 6'5", right? Braxton Jones is 6'5" Jones is 35, almost 36-inch arms, and then Karan's got about 36-inch arms as well. So, like, the Bears value their arm length when it comes to these offensive tackles. And so, to me, like, at number 10, the conversation really is going to come down to the arm length of some of these offensive tackles, if that's the direction the Bears go in. I mean, what do you think here, Zach?
Yeah, well, the thing with Will Campbell, too, is, and I don't know if you guys have heard different, or from what I've read, is there's a chance he could play guard at the next level. He did play tackle at LSU. When you go back to the kind of the Kieran thing, though, like, prospect out of Yale, like, nothing against it. That almost kind of felt like a pick where, like, you were taking a chance there at that spot. Hopefully it pans out. It doesn't look good early. He needs more playing time. But yeah, I could see the arm length. I think that's actually a good thing, a good point for Nick. Like, if you're a Bears fan, a casual football fan, we can geek out over all this stuff. Like, we can geek out over the stats, the measurements, all that. But casual fans too can learn a lot from that. And you bring it up. You brought up the example of the defensive lineman and the two hands and compared to the one hand, and why the arm length is important for the offensive tackle. That should help, let's say like just a regular NFL fan. So there's a lot of value in learning those things. Like you're saying, is it a fit for the Bears? What do they want to look for? What's their model? What's their make? The RAS score, I don't know if you guys have heard of that. I'm sure you have. But like you look at Ryan Poles' RAS scores and you look at the guys he's taken, like Velus Jones, didn't pan out so well, things like that. So for me, kind of going back to the original question, what I like most about and like to learn about the combine is the reports that come out and the news that starts to come out when the entire NFL world is there. All the reporters are there, the agents are there, players are there, prospects are there, coaches, everyone's there. And you kind of start getting that, first little base of rumors, contract negotiations. This player wants out. This player, it wants a new deal, things like that. To me, I think that's kind of one of the things you really need to pay attention to. And not a lot of moves maybe happen or anything. We can also kind of get, a sense of where teams are kind of going with these rumors. You'll see a rumor start at the combine, boom, pops back up, close to the draft. I think the year that the 49ers, when they take Trey Lance, I think before they traded up, there was some like buzz at the combine that they were eyeing quarterbacks and then March 17th, 18th, they traded up, I think it was, to go get Trey Lance. So those rumors and all that kind of start in Indianapolis. Everyone's there. Everyone's out at night. Everyone is talking. So yeah, keep an eye on that as well.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. And with RAS, so relative athletic score, y'all, it takes into account height, weight, it takes into account everything. Marcus Mosier on Marcus_Mosier on Twitter. He's a friend. He's a really good guy. He's
great follow.
He's a Dallas fan. Okay. But he brought up a point which I thought was fascinating. He had the top 10 sack leaders, edge rushers from this past season, and their RAS score. And what was interesting is besides two guys, everyone was above a 9.26. So the top is 10, y'all. One is bad. 10 means you're most athletic. Think like 9.9 was like Chase Claypool.
Yeah.
and then one would be bad. And the ones that aren't were Jonathan Grenard and Kyle Van Noy. But the other thing that was interesting, so we're gonna, get into more of these prospects here in a second, but is the average weight was 253 pounds. So if you're looking for edge rushers, like purely like getting sacks, the weight is the thing, and that pulls down the RAS score, y'all, because it gets factored in. It holds things back. So like guys that I like that we're all going to talk about, you talked about James Pierce Jr., who I'm curious on his arm length. They look huge, his arm length, kind of like the guy up there in with the Raiders, Max Crosby, is Mike Green. Well, how much does he weigh? Jalen Walker, can he play edge? Is he just going to be a backer? What does he weigh? So we're going to go through that list, but in terms of their weight, but also their overall athleticism and everything, y'all, compiled into one score, it's going to matter for pass rushers, and the Bears need another pass rusher.
Yeah, it kind of feels like Ryan Poles looks for that athleticism too, in a way where we saw with Velus Jones, it didn't work out. Kieran, maybe Darnell Wright. I'm trying to think of other guys that kind of fit in that mold of just a lot of athleticism. But like it's kind of interesting to read those RAS scores and see, because I think I saw someone said like the Bears were at the top or something of like players drafted with like the highest RAS scores or something. I have to look that up again. But yeah, I think I saw it across my timeline. But yeah, that's something obviously to pay attention to, moving forward as well with this.
So, and just a disclaimer, the RAS scores a high RAS score does not guarantee a surefire prospect, I believe, as Chase Claypool kind of taught us all. But, one of you guys mentioned running backs earlier and subject to storylines. Like, we've all seen on Bears Twitter that people have been pounding the table for Ashton Genty. The Caleb Johnson hype train has officially left the station in Bears world for me. But, so here's my question. Next week at the Combine, I do anticipate a few tweets being out there saying, hey, the Bears have kind of met with a lot of these running backs. Ohio State, obviously, sending a couple really good running backs. Zach's a UNC fan, so I'm sure he's banging the table for Omarion Hampton, I believe it is. Ginty, sort of everyone's gold standard. You've got the other Georgia running back. I think Trevor Etienne is out there as well. But how much should people be paying attention to the stories regarding a potential Bears draft pick involving a running back? Nick, I'm going to go to you on this one first.
Yeah, I think they should a lot for multiple reasons. One is DeAndre Swift left a lot of meat on the bone. I know the offensive line wasn't great, but his vision was not good. It never has been great. I was a huge Swift fan out of actually high school and college, but he's more athletic than he is a runner. And, he wasn't utilized the best way, which I think Ben Johnson will, but they need another back. As a big Roschon Johnson fan, he's never taken the step. So really, we're going to know how much they value Swift and Johnson based off of how much they're interested in these running backs and how high they draft them. They might love both of those guys, but we know Ben Johnson likes a 1-2 punch because not only did they invest in money in David Montgomery in free agency, they invested, as Zach said, the 12th overall pick in Jahmyr Gibbs. That's a lot of investment in a non-premium position, which has me thinking Ashton Jeanty might be an option because if that's something that they value. But whether it's them, whether it's Caleb Johnson, who I like out of Iowa, I'm not huge on Hampton, who you mentioned. I think he's got really stiff hips. But there's quite a few. I mean, even later in the draft, Trevor Etienne, Travis's brother, Devin Neal. It's a deep class. I don't think that there's only a couple, I think, that are true starters. There's a lot of good committee guys, which Ben Johnson likes committee. So I think that could be the option that they go.
Yeah, I think when you look at Jeanty, you can talk about Jeanty, look at the NFL playoffs. When you look at, Saquon, generational talent, they took him high. Derrick Henry, perfect fit for that Ravens offense, was a monster. A lot of people talk about those two. James Cook, fantastic in Buffalo. I think he actually led the NFL in combined touchdowns or total touchdowns, something like that. It was up there near the top. With the Bears, they need another running back too. They can either part ways with Swift, draft one, keep Roschon. They can keep Swift, draft one. It's a really, I don't know unless you guys know more names, but it's a pretty bad running back class for free agency, right? It's not really a lot of top names out there like we saw the last couple years. So you have to do it with the draft. With Jeanty, look, talent speaks for itself. We all watched them. Really good. I don't know if you could take him at 10 with those needs. I lean more towards when I was watching college football season, I'd watch, some Iowa games. I'd watch a lot of North Carolina games. It would be Caleb Johnson or Marion Hampton. I thought were fantastic. But like you said, it's a pretty deep class. I mean, you could find some guys later on in the draft to complement DeAndre Swift or kind of the other way around. I'd be more comfortable if it was Caleb Johnson, one of the second round picks. I'd probably have it, obviously, Jeanty be 1. I'd probably have Caleb Johnson 2. I'd have Amari on as 3 as my guys, but I'd be fine with either of those. I just think the way the NFL is, I don't want to say prematurely that the NFL is shifting back to the run game, but we've known it as a passing league for a while. But look at the running backs in the playoffs. They did in the Super Bowl. Kansas City, they couldn't run the football at all. And part of that is, Philadelphia's defense had the perfect plan. Vic Fangio, masterpiece. But yeah, I think the Bears definitely need to address the running back position. It would not shock me at all if they drafted one.
Well, and one of the things I think that's interesting with it is, you have the Trevion Henderson and some of these guys that are smaller, quicker. Do they want to pair a bigger back, maybe Hampton, maybe Johnson with that? Is that kind of the formula? I think there's a lot. Devin Neal, I like too. He's really strong. Yeah. I think there's a lot of pieces that we're going to find out about the running game. But kind of, you mentioned this was the playoff success. I think a big part of that is too high defenses, right? Yep. Lighter defenses. We just talked about how we don't care about the weight of defensive ends. Well, then you can run at them, right? And that's kind of, as we saw with Booker, who got literally just thrown out of the club most of the time when they ran at him. Yep. And so, it's a chess match, right? The one thing that I loathe is when a running back can't catch. And so one thing that I've noticed, something I want to watch, is I want to watch if these backs can catch. I want to see how they are in the gauntlet drill. Receivers and tight ends too. I just don't think that's a big position for the Bears. But when you go through the gauntlet drill, as Zach mentioned, earlier, you have to look and you're going to catch and you're going to keep moving down the line. If you move off of the line back and forth, that means a little bit less confidence, I think, in catching the ball. Are they fighting the ball? Do they have natural hands? That's one thing I love about Genty that I went back to his 2023 film is he's a much better receiver than I thought.
Yes.
And so if you want to combine those things, because in previous years, y'all, I know people loved Khalil Herbert, but when Khalil Herbert came on the field, they were running the ball. He wasn't a great receiver. And so that's part of the reason they brought in Swift is now you don't know if it's a run or a pass. And that's a part of the chess match. So if these backs can catch the ball fluidly, I think that's something that's going to be a plus for Chicago because Montgomery and Gibbs were good receivers.
Yep. And so one of the key things to keep in mind with this offense is, earlier I mentioned which prospects fit. I mean, you look at the way Jahmyr Gibbs was used in Detroit. You look at the way David Montgomery was used. It very much gives me the vibes of the Bears want to take kind of that bigger running back, pair him up with a player that can essentially be a runner, but also a receiver. In this offense, Ben Johnson loves to use the running back as a decoy in a sense, where it's kind of just like you don't really know where that running back is going to go. 1 minute it's a Texas route, next minute it's, hey, just pick up the blitz, and then from there go ahead and decide what the linebacker is doing. If the linebacker's blitzing, cool, we'll go pick him up. If the linebacker's not blitzing, get out and find some space in the sort of soft zone. But, to me, I mean, the other thing to kind of keep in mind here, Zach, you brought up round 2 is to me, the storylines are going to shift the perception of what the Bears should do in the second round, because all of a sudden, that is where a lot of these offensive linemen, like a Tate Ratledge or a Tyler Booker, that are all of a sudden, being talked about in the second round. I think the conversation is going to start shifting a little bit away from, offensive line in round 2 to maybe opening it up and saying, all right, well, maybe this is the place where we want to take one of these defensive tackles like a Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, or we want the Bears to go playmaker and go running back plus defensive tackle, or just total wild card, I think, is doubling down on defense entirely.
Yeah, well, so they have the benefit. They have 4 top 100 picks, 3 in the top 40 or 45, something like that. I don't know off the top of my head. They have the 2 that are 3 apart. So they could double down on the trench. I mean, they could triple down on the trenches if they want. I don't think there'd be a wrong answer, in my opinion, for what they could do with those first 3 picks. I think drafting a quarterback with one of those first 3 picks would be like, whoa, okay, what the hell are we doing here? I would even go as far as saying, you can even with your 3rd pick, you can even take a linebacker if you really love someone. A defensive back, I think, would be kind of interesting. A safety, I would personally I'd go trenches. I think 2 of them have to be the trenches. I'd understand the 3rd one being something else. But yeah, there's going to be options. It's a good class, I think, for defensive tackles, defensive linemen, pass rushers, offensive line. Maybe take a chance on someone in the second round if you don't go at number 10, or even if you go at number 10, take another, might take a tackle. Realistically, the Bears could replace 4 players on the offensive line, depending on how you feel about Braxton Jones. I think they probably stick with them, but they definitely need some guys in the interior. And I personally, for me, I would probably try to address the trenches as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. So getting into some of the offensive linemen, and again, just guys, if you're listening to this, anyone listening to the podcast, maybe write some of these names down, because these are the guys that I like, and I'm curious what Zach and Usayd like. So Greg Zabel is a guy that I've been pounding the table for, but he's been rising up the charts too much. So he's away from that 39 and 41 pick in round 2.
That Senior Bowl boom, man.
Yeah, I know his feet are so good. Likely a center, y'all. But as Usayd was saying earlier, he's tall, so he's like 6'6", 316, I think is what he weighed in. Jonah Savannah, if I say that right, big guard for Arizona. And I'm under the assumption, I think, that he's that Ben Johnson wants bigger linemen. Wyatt Millam, I like him. You had mentioned Mababu, I think it is, from Missouri. I mean, big guy, could play tackle, but could move inside. Same with Irsay. He can move inside. Donovan Jackson, you mentioned. Tyler Booker, Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks have been mentioned as well. So there's lots of them. And the problem I'm finding, and Zach, actually, I'm curious what you think, because me and Usayd have talked about this. What are they going to do at center? Because I feel like we could sign guards, we can sign or draft guards, getting a good center is tough. Drew Dahlman's the one everyone talks about. I think he's more of a zone guy. Ryan Kelly's older, gets injured a lot. What is your ideal for what they should do at center, or maybe prospects to look at for the draft?
So obviously it's a very important position, and I wish the Bears would have addressed this a long time ago, because you shouldn't be in this position, especially with a young quarterback, especially with a quarterback that you would like to develop here or get better in your second year. I think obviously the one that stands out that Bears Twitters talk about, everyone's falling in love with, is Dahlman, the Atlanta Falcons center. Do you sign one in free agency? Good centers really, it's kind of like what's that saying? Good centers, good offensive tackles, good edge rushers really don't hit free agency often, and there's probably a reason why. If they do, for him, I'd have to do a little more work on, but he seems to be the top guy that everyone wants. I just don't think it's a great center free agent class. When you look at the offensive line, probably not going to take it. Or excuse me. When you look at the draft, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to take a center at number 10 overall. Zabel, like you said, is probably at this rate, wouldn't say he's going to be there when the Bears pick in the second round. Do you kind of wait? Do you wait for that second round pick? Do you wait for that third round pick to kind of take a guy? I don't know. It's tough. Jared Wilson, is he the Jared Wilson, the Ohio State guy? I think he's the Ohio State guy. Did a little research on him. I actually mocked him. I got to pull it up. I think I actually mocked him to the Bears with one of those second round picks. I'd have to double check, but he was the kind of a guy I was interested on. Excuse me. Jake Majors out of Texas. I liked that Texas offensive line. I thought at times they were pretty good, and I thought they had kind of other issues with their offense. But like I said, man, I think probably the best thing, I think it's a realistic scenario. I don't know if it's the best scenario. Do you go with Coleman Shelton one more year and try to bring in a guy later on in the draft to kind of develop? I don't know, man. It's risky because, center's a really important position. You want that, not only you want an established center, but you want that continuity with your quarterback and Caleb Williams. I guess that would probably be the argument for Coleman Shelton. Maybe bring someone else in.
So that is, to me, where things get interesting, because I think that with that third round pick, it is, once again, to me, like the round 3 picks end up being total wild cards when Ryan Poles is calling the shots. But I would say this, one guy that is not being talked about enough, but probably should, from a smaller school, so I know people are going to have their hesitancies, is Charles Grant from William and Mary. Now, one quick disclaimer here comparing the numbers. If you go to the NFL.com draft profiles over the next couple of weeks here, whatever height and weight numbers you see prior to the combine and over the next couple of days, I should say, are all the numbers that the NFL's pulling from these prospects, basically college rosters. Okay, so like Charles Grant, 6'4", listed at 300. These measurements are going to fluctuate based on the official combine measurements, but a lot of these numbers are not official. But Charles Grant is an interesting name to me because he played a lot of left tackle at William and Mary. He played some left guard as well. And then to me, in the NFL, he has what it takes to sort of play center too. You're talking about a guy that played 41 starts, 36 games he allowed, 36 straight games he started, allowed just 1 sack, in 2024. And so I kind of look at him and I start to wonder, okay, for a player that's 6'4", for a player that is 300 pounds, do the Bears maybe target a guy like him to say, well, we know you're not going to play guard. We know you're not going to play tackle because you probably don't have the arm length for it. Our tackle's already set with Braxton and Darnell Wright. We're going to kick you inside to center and to guard, but kind of cross-train you at both positions to be able to kind of take over. And I think that if he has that big jump that I seriously think he can have, I mean, I'm curious to get your thoughts on him, Nick, but Charles Grant would be my name to watch as a potential hidden gem at center for the Bears.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing I think with the draft is we can talk about these guys and potentially move them to other positions, but then once they're in the league, they don't switch as much. It's kind of an interesting thing because you mentioned Charles Grant, who I think definitely could be one. We had Jackson Slater on the episode not too long ago. He could be one. Marcus Mabau could be one as well. He could play anywhere along the line. Another one, and I don't know if this is just me. I thought this guy could play center, so I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are. Wyatt Millum, I thought he was a guy that could play anywhere on the line and could potentially be a center out of West Virginia. Are you guys getting those same vibes as well?
I'm going to go real quickly. I would definitely say yes and no. I would say Millum is a name to kind of go ahead and watch here, but I just don't see him being the type of guy that, ends up falling to the Bears. Like, I have this thing every year where there's a draft prospect that I like that I'm like, makes sense for the Bears, and then I get too high and that player doesn't end up with the Bears, so then I'm just like, all right, not worth it all. Go ahead, Zach. Wyatt Millum, yay or nay?
Here's the thing, like Nick mentioned, teams are going to have different ideas for different players. Like we said, Gray Zabel listed was a tackle going into this draft. Will he play center? For me, I think you could take a chance on him later on in the draft. But that also goes back to what I was saying. Like, what do you do? Do you go with Coleman Shelton? Do you go take a chance on a prospect later on to develop them? I feel like it's kind of a weak draft overall for centers. I don't know if you guys feel different about it, but in terms of someone you can grab right away, plug in, say, this is my starting center for 10 plus years. I think that's Gray Zabel, and pretty much that's it for right now. Maybe I'll change my mind after a scouting combine, but I would say yes if it came in the later rounds and wasn't, too high of a pick in that area.
And that's what's going to make this thing so fun, because it's like you're just going through a million different scenarios. I want to start to wrap up here, but I'm curious to know. And Zach, I'm going to go to you on this one, and then Nick, and then I will kind of get us out of here. But what's one non-Bears storyline that you're watching for next week in Indianapolis that you ultimately think is worth keeping so many tabs on?
Okay, my mute button now finally works. I think what Tennessee is going to do at number one is very, very interesting. That's kind of like a basic answer, I know. Do they go Cam Ward? Do they go Shador? Do they go Travis Hunter? I think they have so many options at number one. I think Travis Hunter is one of the best players in this class. I absolutely love it. But what they do could have a ripple effect on players available for the Bears. We saw it last year when Michael Penix went right before them. Not a lot of people thought Michael Penix was going to go that high going into the draft, and it benefited the Bears because they got who they wanted in Roma Dunze. I think if Tennessee, let's say take, Travis Hunter, or they take a quarterback, I think either way it will work good for the Bears. So I think teams are trying to come up. They're going to try and trade up at other spots. The teams behind them are interesting as well. Like the Giants are going to need a quarterback. Patriots don't need a quarterback. They could be a spot for Travis Hunter. McMillan out of Arizona, I think, is very interesting. Will a team take him in the top 10? So for my answer, I think it's going to be what Tennessee does at number one, where they're leaning, and kind of how these quarterbacks are going to stack up, because I'm very interested to see who's going to win that battle between Ward and Shador.
Yeah, and then my thing, I guess I'm interested is non-Bears, and this is something Zach mentioned earlier, but when you get a bunch of football guys together in one building for many, many days, they're going to talk, whether it's there or, at the hotel at night over a drink or whatever. That's when we're going to start hearing free agent rumors, draft rumors, potential trades. And that's the stuff I like to hear. And again, I know some people, they hate rumors. I like them. It's fun. It just mixes things up. You don't know what's going to happen. Oh, I don't know. This guy was on the trade block. Like, where's Deebo Samuel going to go? Like, all these things are going to happen, but it's kind of like the baseball meetings. They have the meetings and then more things happen. When you get the combine together, like there's no other time really, because when the NFL draft, everyone's in their separate locations. Everyone comes together for this. So we're going to hear a lot more rumors and things going on that maybe we weren't even aware of just due to the combine and the proximity.
So those are two really good points. Now, to me, I look at the teams picking after the Bears, and I suddenly say whatever storyline breaks about San Francisco, Dallas, Miami, Indianapolis, and Arizona, let's just call it how it is. I think that San Francisco, Dallas, Miami, and definitely Indianapolis are the 4 teams that we can say are in desperation mode. I think that one of these 4 teams is going to trade up, leapfrog the Bears, and you know what? They're going to do it out of sheer desperation, which is going to force the Bears to change their approach at 10. Now, I know I said non-Bears related storyline, but I look at this thing in the sense of like, let's just say Dallas comes up or Miami comes up and they want to get to 7, 8, or 9. Then all of a sudden you're in a situation where it's like, all right, the entire top 10, which is known for being crazy and thrown in limbo anyway, ends up being even crazier than expected. And the reason being is because I could totally see one of these teams wanting to kind of get that stud defensive player edge rusher, and a team like New York, the Jets, for example, wanting to kind of trade out of 7, go back to, let's just say, 12, 13, or 14, and end up accumulating more assets and wait for what a lot of people think is going to be a better quarterback class next year to be able to find their franchise quarterback of the future. Like, it sounds crazy, but the draft is one thing that has a trillion different possibilities. And just the way that the top 15 order shakes out alone, there's a lot of teams desperate this year, more desperate than ever, I would say, to go ahead and kind of get this thing right. You know, before we get out of here, thanks for listening. Make sure you're following the Bear Report. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Check out the website. You can follow us on Twitter at HalasBeat, at _ Nick Whalen, at Zack Pearson. That's ZACK _Pearson. I've learned to promote Zach's handle just like he says it on the Bear Report podcast. We will be back next week with a couple episodes. Keep up with Zach's coverage. He's going to be live from Indianapolis reporting as much as he can. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, bear down. We'll see you next time.